Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. I appreciate you guys making time out of your day to be here and learn with me, read along with me, review these books for educational purposes, critique, documentary, all that. Commentary, education, especially, though. All right. Fair use. Fair use. So, again, we're back in the book The Indians of the Southeastern United States by John R. Swanton, Classics of Smithsonian Anthropology. So, what we have been doing is going through many different tribes of the Southeast United States. A lot of these tribes people never heard of, didn't know what areas they populated, who they were related to. So, that's kind of what we're trying to break down here. And we've been doing it in alphabetical order. And today we continue where we left off with the letters. And then we're going to start off with the O's today, okay? Oh, so we're in the letter O's, and it says here, the first tribe we have, and this is on page 164 of this book, the Ocale. In 1539, De Soto entered the country of this tribe, which was located northeast of Withlacoochee River, Florida, near the present Ocala. It is scarcely mentioned by later writers, but was apparently closely related to the Aquera tribe, with which it probably united. So the Aquera, we went over their people, right, in the part one of this series, and we did the letters A. Okay, so the Ocale related to the Aquera tribe in Florida, and specifically near present-day Ocala. That's where they get the name Ocale, from the tribe Ocale. Okay, and what happened? Ocale population, unknown. So what happened to the Ocale people? What do you mean you don't know? And again, we're going to emphasize, right? What happened? Well, let's fill in the blanks. We have enslavement, relocation, paper genocide, reclassification, all kinds of things, right? That might have happened to these people. So it says here in the next tribe, Occaneechi, a tribe whose historic seat was on an island in Roanoke River near the present Clarksville, Virginia. Edward Blandy and his companions learned of them in 1650, but did not visit their town. In 1670, however, Lederer reached them and found them acting as middlemen in the trade of the region. In 1676, the Saponi and Tutelo, Eastern Siouan, settled on islands nearby, and the same year the Conestoga sought refuge with the Occaneechi, but attempting to dispossess them of their homes, they were driven out, and it was perhaps then that the Conestoga settled among the Meherrin. All right, we read about them in a previous part. Later in the year of the Occaneechi were attacked by the Nathaniel Bacon and suffered a severe defeat. Under pressure from the English and Iroquois, they presently left their town and fled toward the south, where they were found in 1701 by Lawson in a village on Eno River, about the present Hillsboro, Orange County, North Carolina. Okay? About 1714, they were located at Fort Cristana with the Tutelo, Manahuac, and some other tribes. These are Eastern Siouan peoples, right? So are they also? Yeah, most likely these are Eastern Siouan people, the Occaneechi, and some other tribes, right? That's why they're settling with these. All the tribes were Eastern Siouan. And when these went north, about 1740, the Occaneechi accompanied them, having, according to Byrd, taken the name of the Saponi. So they became the Saponi according to him, or maybe they were absorbed into the Saponi people. Saponi in the Tutelo language, again, all Eastern Siouan dialect of Siouan, means Blackfoot. If you guys don't know, Saponi, Blackfoot. In case you're wondering where your Blackfoot might be coming from in some cases, or in general, I would say. So Occaneechi, he's saying they became, they took the name Saponi. So what does that mean? You know, the Pony were their own people too, though. It says see Saponi and Tutulo. So we're gonna go ahead and read about them. At least the Saponi today. I think we're gonna get to the S. Yeah. So we'll see what it says. Again, all Eastern Siouan tribes, the Eastern Woodland. And then it goes over their population, the Occaneechi population. We only know that their numbers were always small. Yeah, sure. So again, and that the 5 tribes of Occaneechi, the Chakori, Saponi, and Tutulo, and Keyawi were estimated to number about 750 in 1709. Okay, so he's saying that together, the Chakori, the Saponi, the Tutulo, and the Keyawi, and again, yes, confirmed these are Eastern Siouan people, they are together collectively known as the Occaneechi. That's what he's saying, right, in this book. Either way, they're all Eastern Siouan originating their people in Ohio, guys. You didn't know, before they went down into the East Coast. This is thousands of years ago, way before Europeans. So we continue. It says here, Ocita or Ucita, a tribe near the entrance to Tampa Bay in 1539, when De Soto landed in their territory. One of their principal towns was seized upon by the Spaniards as their headquarters, and it is believed that this was on Terra Ceia Island. Ocita was probably identical with the province later called Pohoy. All right, and that's all they give us about these people. What happened to them? What happened to these people? But you see the areas they inhabited, right, in case you're familiar or your people go back to these places. It says here, the Oconee, another tribe, okay? There appear to have been at least 2 divisions of this tribe. One was on or near the Georgia coast, where there was a mission in 1655 bearing their name. A mission, huh? The Oconee mission. While another Oconee mission, possibly for the same people, makes its appearance among the Appalachee at the very same time. It is likely that these southern Oconee were absorbed into the Appalachee. The latter mission was named San Francisco de Oconee, and it was 1 league from Ayubale, or Ayubel, or about 3 leagues, nearly 8 miles west of Auxilla River. The northern division gave its name to Oconee River and is first mentioned in 1608, unless a reference by Father Pareja 6 years earlier concerns this branch of the tribe. In 1695, a letter of the governor of Florida speaks of it as one of 4 against which an expedition had been sent. Up to that time, it was probably on Chattahoochee River, but it then moved over to the Oconee River and settled just below the rock landing. The Yamasee War caused it to move back among the lower creeks on Chattahoochee River, where part remained until after 1799, when they were on the left bank 6 miles below the Apalachicola settlement. Part, however, had gone to Florida, probably about 1750, where they lived in the Alachua Plains. There, Bartram visited them in 1774 and described their town. Before 1832, all had probably united in Florida, where they became the nucleus of the Seminole Nation. All right? You guys hear that, right? Oconee. But see, a lot of different groups are coming together, and eventually they became the Seminole Nation. We've been reading in this book, right? All right, a couple references of that already. So you guys see? So they're saying this particular Oconee, right, were the nucleus of the Seminole Nation and were soon lost in the mass of the Seminole population. Now everybody's just Seminole, 5 civilized tribes. A more northerly home for a part of the Oconee may be indicated in the name of the Oconee town in the Cherokee country on Seneca Creek near the present Walhalla, Oconee County, South Carolina. Walhalla, huh? Isn't that like a Nordic term, right? The name bears some resemblance to the Cherokee Ewanee River, but it is pronounced somewhat differently. Ukunu. Hmm. I might be killing that. So then they go on with their population, let's say in the mission in San Francisco, 1675, about 200. And yeah. So what happened? Where's all these people at? Who are they today? Who are they today, guys? This is what I'm telling you. Okay. So the Ofo, if I'm not mistaken, is also Eastern Siouan, but let's say Ofo or the Ofogoula or Mosopelea, all right? Another tribe here, guys. This tribe first appears in history under some form of the name last given, and from the maps of Minette and Franklin, it seems that some years before 1673, they lived in 8 villages in or near southern Ohio. They are said to have been driven from this country by the Iroquois, and in 1673, Marquette found them on the east bank of the Mississippi, below the mouth of the Ohio. So you see what the Iroquois are causing some tribes to do, right? And again, yes, they're Siouan, I believe. They were in the same neighborhood of when LaSalle descended the Mississippi in 1682. But when he reached the Taensa villages on Lake St. Joseph on his return, the tribe, or part of it, had sought refuge with the Taensa and had been allowed to settle among them. From Daniel Cox's map, it would appear that on their way south, they had stopped near the Quapaw village of Ucita on Arkansas River. By 1690, however, they had reached Yazoo River, where they placed themselves near the Yazoo and Tunica tribes, and were there until the Natchez uprising in November 1729. The Yazoo and Coroa participated in this, but the Ofo refused to do so and went on south to the Tunica near the mouth of Red River, allies of the French, with whom they remained until Fort Rosalie was rebuilt. By 1739, they had settled close to this latter and were there until after 1758. In 1764, they took part in an attack upon an English convoy ascending the Mississippi, and were then probably about where Hutchins found them in 1784, in a small village on the west side of the Mississippi, 8 miles above Point Coupee. In course of time, the few survivors joined the Tunica at Marksville. They got absorbed into the Tunica, he's saying, where in 1908, the writer found a single individual, a woman named Rosa Pierrette. All right, so now he's like, oh, the last Indian, the one officially claimed. What happened to all the ones that got reclassified? And obtained a short vocabulary of her language. She died about 1915, and the tribe and language died with her. You guys hear that? Literally. So again, we got to dodge the hijack. Here you go. Hijack alert. Go ahead, guys. Make sure you dodged it. Again, they're always going extinct. Oh, we don't know what happened. That was the last one. Yeah, sure it was. You enslaved a lot of them. Oh, man. Reclassified, paper genocide, relocated. So don't believe this, guys. Don't believe that, all this history, all these people are gone. You're still here. So then they go here with their population numbers. You can go ahead and take a look at that if you like on your own. Pause it. These numbers are silly sometimes. So it says here, Okchai. I never heard of these people. So it says the earliest known location of this Muskogee town and tribe was on the west side of Coosa River, some miles above its junction with the Tallapoosa. By 1738, a part had moved to a branch of Kaulija Creek, an affluent of the Tallapoosa. All right, so another people that's going to Kaulija. Remember what happened to Kaulija? Supposedly it was founded by a colored man, right? And, we showed what he looked like, definitely a person that can probably pass for white too. But yeah, these were black folks. So, no matter how light he was, these were black folks, right? And now, were they really just black folks? We did a little video on that, and we got some great information on him, who his people might be. But what happened to that town? it was flooded. It's under a dam or something, or a lake right now, Kaulaija. All right. So, but not back then in the 1700s. You see, so another tribe is going there. So, who are the real people that were in Kaulaija? An affluent of the Tallapoosa, where their principal settlement seems to have been located until the removal to Oklahoma. Though a part remained near their former home for a considerable period, they remained there, right? There is a town known as Okchai or Little Okchai, formed of Alabama Indians who had formerly lived near the Okchai proper. The Okchai are often called Fish Pond Indians, and as early as 1791, there was a distinct settlement of the tribe called Tlatlocalca, or Fish Pond, on a small affluent of Elk Cat or Elk Hachi, a western branch of the Tallapoosa. The name was also given to a square ground in Oklahoma, founded in consequence of separation brought about by the Civil War. Another Okchai branch was known as Asila Nabi, or Green Leaf. Wow. It was founded sometime before 1792, and as in the case of Fish Pond, there is a latter square ground of this name in Oklahoma, not far from the Fish Pond ground, and brought into existence also by the forces to which the latter owed its origin. Hatchet Creek, or Hatchie, claimed as another branch, was in existence in Hawkins' time in 1799 and maintained itself until the period of the emigration, when it probably united with the main body of Okchai. After the removal of the Okchai, re-established their square ground near the Hana, Oklahoma, at a site occupied down to the present day. A part of these people joined the Seminole in Florida, but we have only a bare mention of them. So another group that might have eventually become Seminole, huh? Now you guys see the little migration patterns who your people might be connected to, originally, right? So again, with their population numbers, go ahead and take a look if you like. All right, so we continue with another tribe. And we have here the Okelousa, signifying black water in Choctaw. Okelousa, a small tribe living west of the lower course of the Mississippi in the early part of the 18th century. According to the Creek migration legend related to Oglethorpe by Chiquili, the ancestor of the Muskogee Indians, stopped at one time during their movement east on a creek called Palouse Creek, which is probably intended for Ocalousa or Okelousa Creek. In 1541, the Spaniards under De Soto, while they were in the Chickasaw country, learned of a province known as Calusa, in which we find Ocalousa, said to contain more than 90 villages not subject to anyone, with a savage population, very warlike and much dreaded. Occupying a fertile land, all right? That's what they wanted. That's why they're like, oh, they savages. Yeah, you wanted their fertile land. And that's why they were warlike, because they weren't trying to give up their fertile land. These references may be to the tribe in question before they crossed the Mississippi, but on the other hand, since we also find the name bestowed on a territory west of the Mississippi by Bierma and much farther north, it may be a general appellation for occupants of certain alluvial lands along the Mississippi or its tributaries. In 1682, the Okelousa appear as allies of the Huma in the destruction of a village of the Tangi Pahoa Indians on the east bank of the Mississippi, and La Harpe informs us that they were a wandering people living west of the river, but Dupratz is the only writer to locate them definitely on two little lakes to the west of and above Point Coupee. What afterward became the tribe, we do not know, oh, we don't know what happened to them. But they probably united with the Huma or some other Choctaw-speaking Indians in the vicinity. Because they probably anciently related, right? But you guys see, this could be your people, and now they say, oh, we don't know. Oh, they probably. Yeah, probably. And it says, unless we accept for the population, the 16th century, this tribe's always represented a small blah, blah, blah. Okay, so he's saying they were probably put together with the Wachan Chawacha. But other than that, they don't know, right? And we continue, right, to another tribe. It says here the Okmulgee, a branch of the Hichiti, which settled at the Great Bend of the Chattahoochee near the Chaya or Chayaha and Osochi, probably after the Yamasee uprising. Hawkins traces their origin to the old Hichiti town site at Macon. Wow. About 1822, they are placed east of Flint River, and they retained their independence after the removal to Oklahoma, when they reestablished their square ground in the northeastern corner of the Creek territory, but gave it up early. Men belonging to this town, such as the Perrymans, colored folks, and Pleasant Porter, played a great part in the history of the Creek Nation after that date. When I'm saying the Perrymans, we know who free people of color, so-called black, but they were Indians, right? So, they might be going way back to the Okmulgee. Now they're just part of the Creeks, but specifically Okmulgee, huh? So again, they give their populations and their estimates, and yeah, we thought it's a hijack. So that's all they said about the Okmulgee, but that's a pretty deep tribe right there. So we continue to the next one, and it's the Onatheaqua or Onatheaqua or Onatheaqua. Wow. This name is given by Londoner, right, the Huguenot, and Lemoyne to one of the two principal Timucua tribes bordering upon the Appalachia in 1564 and 1565. For lack of any suitable single term for the group, it has been adopted as a name for the Timucuans, later gathered into the missions of Santa Cruz de Tarijica, San Juan de Guacara, Santa Catalina, and Ajoica, which agree in general with the location of the Onatheaqua, as shown on Lemoyne's map. Ajoica was probably a visita of Santa Catalina. Utina may also have settled in them. All these tribes we never heard of, right? All these people-specific tribes or clans, they, paper genocide, enslaved, reclassified, relocated, or absorbed into other tribes, right? Or again, murdered. So their populations is, based on what they're saying in the missions, they don't really know. All right. So we continue with another tribe. It says here the Opelousa. Our earliest mention of this tribe, which seems to be in a report written by Bienville about 1725, places them in the Opelousas district and near the site of the present city of Opelousas. And here they remain as long as we have any separate notice of them. In 1805, we learned that their village was 15 miles west of Opelousas. The last representatives of this tribe probably joined the Atacapa. Probably joined, huh? So you see, to whom they are supposed to have been related. They're related with the Atacapa. Check out my Atacapa videos, guys. All right, and here's their numbers according to them. Yeah, you guys can take a look. Pause it if you like and read it. All right. We dodged the hijack with the little numbers. So we continue with another tribe, and it's the Osochi. There is a reason to think that the origin of this tribe is to be south in Florida, and that the Soto narratives 1539 contained our first references to it under the forms Usachile, etc. Yeah, that's very close. In 1656, a great rebellion of Temucua Indians against the Spanish government broke out. It is said that some rebels fled from the country, and shortly afterward we find reference to a separate body of Temucua on or near Apalachicola River. The original Florida name also seems to be preserved in a Spanish official map dated 1765, which places the Apalachee, or Sachile, at the junction of the Chattahoochee and Flint. However, they were located on the Chattahoochee as early as 1675. After this time, we find the Osochi laid down on maps or given in tables of population as a tribe or town between the two rivers last mentioned. But farther north, and before 1794, they were on or near the Flint, since Hawkins tells us that during that year they moved from this region to the west bank of the Chattahoochee and settled above the Chiaja in the great bend of the river. A considerable part of them continued to camp east of the river, and they and the Chiaja together founded the town of Hotalji, Uyana. After the removal to Oklahoma, they first settled on the north side of Arkansas River, some distance above the present city of Muskogee. Later, in consequence of the so-called Green Peach War, and in order to be near the Hichiti, part of them went to the Council Hill. They have now disappeared as a distinct element in the Creek Nation. You guys hear? They disappeared. Oh no, they disappeared. Poof, into thin air. Like that. Poof, into thin air. So absorbed into the so-called Creek Nation, not everybody's part of the 5 civilized tribes, huh? Again. So what was the origin of a lot of the so-called Creeks, a lot of the Seminoles, so-called Cherokees, and so on and so on. Yeah, even though they might be related anciently, right? Or not. But it says here with their populations, numbers, and yeah. Go ahead and take a look at it, guys. We touched the hijack. All right. So now we go on to the letter P, right? So we do some tribes with letters P. And we begin here with the Pakana. So shout out to Red Lion Pakana. Yeah. Shout out to Red Lion Pakana. He must be these must be his people, right? He knows the original name of, specific name of one of his ancient tribal ancestors, right? Tribe, right? So it says here the Pakana. The earliest known home of these Indians was on Hatchet Creek in what is now Coosa County, Alabama. Shortly after the foundation of Fort Toulouse, at the junction of the Coosa and Tallapoosa rivers, which happened in 1717. A part of them moved to that neighborhood to enjoy trade advantages, and they never reunited. Those who remained in their old country settled on the southern border of the Creek Nation after their removal to Oklahoma, and their square ground occupies the same spot today as the one then chosen. The other division of the tribe moved to Red River in 1763 or 1764, along with the Taensa and Apalachee. In 1805, Sibley found them on Calcasieu River, Louisiana, and according to Alabama tradition, they subsequently united with the Alabama in Texas. That's where Red Lion Pakana is from, Texas right now, like his people, but they were all over these areas. He knows the migrations of his ancestors, right? So where the last of them died many years ago. So the last one died. That's the hijack. You see how we can prove that wrong? He's still alive. Red Lion Pakana, let him know you're still alive, man. What's up with that hijack, man? See, this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. But see, Red Lion Pakana in most people's eyes will be classified as colored, right? Or Negro or so-called black, right? But that's not him. He's got a real ancestry, a real ethnicity, a lot of Indian in him, right? And this is one of them, Pakana, and they're saying, oh, the last one died. You see, that's the hijack. big time. That is so wrong. That is so, so wrong. All right. That's why I say about these population numbers, I don't take them too serious. And we continue with the Pamlico. The earliest known home of this tribe was on the lower course of Pamlico River, North Carolina, and the neighboring coast, where they were discovered by the English in 1584 and 85, way back, right? North Carolina, the Pamlico. Have you guys ever heard of them? In 1696, they were nearly destroyed by smallpox, and in 1710 were confined to a single village. Oh, they were nearly destroyed, huh? Just by smallpox, not just by murder and enslavement and paper genocide. They sided with the hostile Tuscarora in the War of 1711 to 1713. And at its close, that part of the Tuscarora, under treaty with the English, agreed to exterminate them. Whoa, you see that? So even though they sided with the Tuscarora, eventually the Tuscarora made a treaty with the English to get rid of them, so-called exterminate them, huh? Uh-oh. You see this, guys? That's real. Look it up. I bet you'll see that's real. The remnant was probably incorporated as slaves in the Tuscarora. You guys hear that? It's probably, or just as slaves, right? In general, in a plantation. But I bet you a lot of these Tuscarora had plantations. Huh. Wow, enslaving the Pamlico. Who were the Pamlicos? The Pamlico are the only Algonquin, that's why, people of North Carolina, from whom a vocabulary has been preserved. And they were the only Algonquin tribe there. And see what happened to them, right? So if they got incorporated as slaves, that means they could have been sold to any, right? As slaves anywhere, right? Like, this is what we're trying to tell you when we talk about the real slave trade. Right? So what Africans? So the population, we dodged the hijack. We continue. We got here the Pascagoula. The Pascagoula. In 1699, this tribe was living in 16 to 20 leagues up Pascagoula River. Iberville heard of them early that year, very shortly after his arrival on the coast, and in the summer of 1699, Bienville visited them. Iberville also visited them in the spring of 1700, and communications continued friendly and intimate, but the attention of the French was soon drawn off in other directions. If we may trust Dupratz, they moved to the Gulf Coast some time afterwards. In 1764, they crossed the Mississippi and settled for a short time on the Great Stream, itself not far from the mouth of Red River. But in 1787, permission was granted them to locate at the confluence of the Rigolet, Du Bon Dieu, and Red River, and they probably moved at about the same time, their territory line between Bayou de la Cour and Bayou Philippe. In 1795, they removed to lands granted them by a body of Choctaw Indians on Bayou Boif, and they continued to reside here until early in the 19th century, when they and the neighboring Biloxi sold their lands to Miller and Fulton. And I think, again, these are Siouan people. The Biloxi I know are. I think these Pascagoula are as well. So some of them, again, probably died out here, while others, no doubt, accompanied the Biloxi to Oklahoma. In 1908, the writer met two Indians living among the Alabama of Texas, who claimed that their mother was a Pascagoula Indian. So they're trying to say, oh, we found a guy who says, it's like this, they're looking for Bigfoot, right? Like the last, like some mysterious ancient people, like that disappeared and they went extinct. Like, it's silly, guys. Like, a lot of the Pascagoula are still here, a lot of the Biloxi, right? And here's their, numbers again. We dodged the hijack. So now we got the Pawokti or Pawokti. Pawokti. The earliest mention of this town or tribe seems to be on the Lamhadi map, where it has the form Puka. Pawokti. This applies to the year 1707, and as Pawokti afterward appeared beside Tawasa as one of the Alabama towns, it seems probable that it followed the fortunes of the Tawasa, moving first to Mobile after the attack by northern Indians, which uprooted the latter, and then passing to the upper Alabama about the time when Fort Toulouse was established, which would be in 1717. Hawkins gives a description of the town as it appeared in 1799, but this is about the last separate notice we have of it, and it evidently fused with the rest of the Alabama settlements. All right. So the population, we have no separate figures. They don't want you to know what happened. The same fate as Tawasa. What was that? They didn't tell us. All right. But remember these names, guys, right? In these areas. So we continue with another tribe, and they are called the Patiri. Patiri. This tribe lived in central Texas, somewhere west of Trinity River, and perhaps along Caney Creek, from the fact that it was placed in the mission of San Ildefonso with the Acoquisa, the Bidai, and Detos. All right, we read about all those tribes already, and that the further fact that related tribes were said to have been put under the same mission. It may be inferred that it belonged to the Atakapan group. The Patiri are part of the Atakapan group, guys. In case you didn't know, the above-mentioned mission was founded in 1748 to 49, and the name of the tribe occurs again in Morphy's list applying to about 1781, but that is all we know of it, though we may assume that it finally united with one of the other associated bands at San Ildefonso. All right, and look what it says. Patiri population, there are no figures. Move along, don't worry about it. They went extinct, they disappear. We don't know. Again, guys, this is why I think this is very important, and I think one day we'll realize how many of you guys are related to these tribes. You know, specifically, like your people come from these specific people right here. You know, and then it says here we continue with the Pedee. Pedee, a tribe found living on the river Pedee in the present state of South Carolina when Charleston was founded. A map of 1715 locates the Pedee town on the east bank near the present Sarah, right? Eastern Siouan. All right, Eastern Siouan peoples right here we're dealing with again. Eastern Siouan tribes, a lot of Eastern Siouan, right? A lot of you come from these Eastern Siouan tribes but don't know it. In 1717, representatives of this and several other small tribes went to Charleston to renew their old friendship. In 1744, along with some Natchez Indians, they killed 7 Catawba, and in consequence fled south to be near the white settlements, where some of them remained as late as 1755. In 1752, however, the Catawba asked Governor Glenn to advise the Pedee to join them, and this invitation was accepted by part of the tribe, but others remained near the whites, so-called whites, Europeans, colonists, right? A South Carolina document of 1808 states that within the memory of persons then living, there were 30 Indians of the Pedee and Cape Fear tribes forming one settlement under a chief called King Johnny, and that in 1808, only one half-breed woman was left. Gosh, the hijack. You see what I'm saying? There's always, oh, they all died. All these people, they're all gone, right? They want you to believe that. Yo, that's the hijack. Some may be represented among the so-called Croatan Indians, so-called, right? Just like the lost colony of Roanoke, Croatan. Huh. And then the Pedee population, all right, doesn't list them and they don't know. All right, they don't know. All right, so we continue with another tribe here is the Pensacola. Cabeza de Vaca describes at considerable length various encounters with the Spaniards who accompanied Narvaez and Indians along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, in what was afterwards ascertained to be the Pensacola country. The companions of Tristan de Luna very likely met some of them in 1559 to 1560. The first definite mention of the tribe by name occurs, however, in 1677. In 1686, they were visited by the expedition under Enriquez Barroto, and we learned that they were at war with the Mobile. In 1698, the Spanish post of Pensacola was established and took the name of the tribe. But although Indians were encountered in the vicinity, the Pensacola tribe itself was scattered and was believed to have been destroyed. This, however, was incorrect, since later historians mentioned them among the small tribes of the region, and Bienville, in his account of the Louisiana tribes, written about 1725, says that they were in a village on Pearl River, not far from the Biloxi. Their language and customs seem to have been almost identical with those of the Choctaw, with whom they no doubt ultimately united, all right? They are the same people as the Choctaw, all right? The Pensacola Indians, right? They were trying to say they were destroyed and they lied. You see what I'm saying? And we touched the hijack with their population numbers, all right? We continue. We got another tribe here, the Pilthlako, or Opillako. This was a Creek town or tribe of considerable prominence, all right? Of considerable prominence. Probably a branch of some better known Creek division. It appears on the Chinese map of 1733 and repeatedly until 1799, when Hawkins visited it and described its location. Possibly it was one of those which removed to Florida after the Creek War, as it does not appear in the census list of 1832. They may have split from the Okchai, all right? They may have split from the Okchai. Remember the Okchai? We just read about them. So again, that was the Pilthlako. And they go with their population numbers, and that's the hijack. Huh. All right. Go on to another tribe, guys. We're going through these tribes, right? Learning about, even getting familiar with their names, because a lot of these names, a lot of people never hear or knew about. So we got the Pohoy, or Pooy, Pojoi, or Osochi. Pojoi, a tribe or province probably connected with the Timucua located on Tampa Bay, and apparently identical with the Ucita of the De Soto Chronicles, okay? Same people, at least in part. In 1612, it was visited by Spanish expedition under an ensign named Cartaya. In 1675, Bishop Calderon speaks of a Pojoi River, which was 6 leagues from the beach of Pusali. In 1680, there is a reference to it as a Occalousa province, occupied by a non-Christian people. But these Indians were clearly distinct from the Occalousa, although bordering upon them. Sometime before 1726, about 20 of these Indians were placed in a mission called Santa Fe, 9 leagues south of St. Augustine. But an epidemic had destroyed most of them by that date, and before 1728, the rest had returned to their former abodes. They had destroyed them, huh? Or did you enslave them? Reclassify them. So there goes their population numbers again. And it says here, the Potano, all right, another tribe, the Potano. One of the most powerful, all right, one of the most powerful. And did you know about them? This is one of the most powerful of the Timucuan tribes, first encountered by De Soto in their historic seats in the western part of what is now Alachua County, Florida. In 1565, the French colonists of St. John's River assisted the rival Utina Indians in a raid into the Potano country. After the Spaniards had displaced the French, this tribe caused them considerable trouble, and in 1584 cut off a body of Spanish soldiers under a Captain Andrada. They were defeated later and driven from their town or from one of them, remaining away apparently until 1601, when they asked permission to return. On September 12, 1597, 48 Potano Indians came in company with the heir to the Potano chieftainship of St. Augustine, where they remained 4 days and were given rations of 288 pounds of flour. By 1602, Potano was reported to be asking for missionaries. In Ica Potano, example, Potano town, there were 9 Christians, and in Potano, 10 Christians, and a number of humans. In 1606, Father Martin Prieto, Prieto, with one companion, entered the Potano country and founded 3 missions called San Francisco, San Miguel, and Santa Ana, and baptized all of the inhabitants of another place called San Buenaventura, where formerly Indians had been killed by Spanish adventurers. These adventurers were evidently the companions of De Soto, and we are told furthermore that the old chief of Santa Ana had been imprisoned by that Spanish explorer and had in consequence acquired such an antipathy to Spaniards in general that missionary work there would have been a failure except for the fortunate interposition of a hurricane. Whoa. But you see what's going on? Who's getting enslaved and put in missions? Yeah. We are somewhat puzzled to find the towns of the freshwater province included at times in that of Potano. The principal Potano mission was San Francisco de Potano, except perhaps Santa Fe de Toloco, which lay between Potano and Utina, and regarding the tribal affiliations of which we are left in doubt, though it was one of the most important of all missions in the Timucua country. San Miguel was perhaps the mission station afterward called Apalu, a word which means ford. In the Timucua language, Apalo, Apalu, Apalo, Timucua language, the Potano chief's name occurs among those who took part in the uprising of 1656, and Bishop Calderon reported in 1675 that the mission was deserted. Some sort of visita was perhaps kept up, however, since Governor Salazar, in a letter to the king written that same year, lists it among the missions and says there were about 60 persons connected with it. The name is furthermore present in a list dated 1680. After that period, the Indians must have declined rapidly in numbers, since we only hear of a small town of Timucua near St. Augustine, and the rest must have scattered to other tribes. And that's their numbers here, right? If you want to look at that, take a pause and go ahead. All right, we continue now. And a lot of you know this tribe, and this is the Powhatan. The Powhatan. This confederation of tribes, that's what it really is, a confederation of tribes, was in the tidewater country of Virginia on both sides of Chesapeake Bay in 1607 when the colony of Virginia was established. Most of the tribes had been brought under one control by the chief Powhatan. No considerable number of Powhatan Indians seem ever to have removed from the locality. They gradually died out. Listen, they gradually died out? They're trying to say they went extinct, right? Or retired into 1 or 2 reservations where a few mixed blood descendants still live. A few mixed blood with what? Are they trying to say these are black because they're black folks, right? The principal events in their early history were the unsuccessful attempt made by Spanish Jesuits in 1570 to establish a mission among them, the founding of Jamestown, the subsequent relations between the colonists and the great chief who bore the same name as the Confederacy, and his noted daughter Pocahontas, and the 2 uprisings of the Indians under Opelousa in 1622 to 1636, and then in 1644 to 1645, after the last of which the Indians were placed upon reservations. You see, they lost, so that's what happened. In 1654, the Pamunkey chief Potopotomoy and 100 of his warriors joined the Virginians. Listen, they helped the colonists, the Virginians, in an attack on some of the Siouan tribes. Who? Oh, they are attacking the Eastern Siouan people. All these tribes we've been learning about, guys. This is what I'm trying to tell you. That's why you don't know about them. They attacked the Siouan tribes who were threatening the settlements, but they were defeated with great loss. You see what happened when you mess with the Siouan tribes. It says in 1675 they were falsely accused of depredations actually committed by Conestoga Indians and were attacked by a force of Europeans headed by Nathaniel Bacon. In August 1676, Bacon stormed a fort near Richmond, into which a large number of the Indians had gathered, and massacred nearly all of its occupants of both sexes and all ages. A treaty made at Albany in 1722 put an end to attacks upon these Indians by the Iroquois. Again. But from this time on, they sank into obscurity. Most of those on the eastern shore, who had meanwhile become much mixed with Negroes. See what I was saying, guys? This is why they're trying to call them mixed bloods, because these are people of color who are literally today showing their genealogy, saying, yeah, look, this is all our ancestors, right? So now they're trying to say they're mixed because they're supposedly Negroes, right? That's not a race. That's not a nation. That's not a tribe. Negroes is not a tribe, right? So what you talking about? Copper-colored tribes of America has always been copper-colored tribes of America. So you see, I told you guys, this is deep, right? That's what I'm saying. Look, paper genocide. Most of those on the eastern shore who had meanwhile become much mixed with Negroes, Dodged the hijack, were driven away in 1831 during the excitement occasioned by the slave rising under Nat Turner. Nat Turner, he was of the same people. I believe he was of the same people, guys. And check out my video on Nat Turner so you can see the specific tribe, related to these people. You mean slave rising. That doesn't mean anything about Negroes or Africans. That doesn't mean any of that, right? Go check out my video on Nat Turner, guys, if you haven't seen it. He was a real person. Don't let people tell you he was a fictional character and you didn't even verify when he got living descendants. Disrespecting the living descendants. I've talked to them. Anyways, so it says there are still in existence. It says mixed blood descendants. All right, so just listen. I'm gonna just say it like this: there's still in existence descendants of the Pamunkey, Chickahominy, Powhatan, Mataponi, the Werowokomoko, the Nasamon, the Rappahannock, the Potomac, the Tappahannock, the Wikokomoko, and Accohannock, though only the first two are of any considerable size. The best picture of an ancient Powhatan Indian, discounting the European dress, is that of Pocahontas. Yeah, okay. Pocahontas is the only model. But you see how they admitting something here. This is deep, guys. I hope if you're listening right now, listen. Oh, now they exist only as Negroes? You guys that's literally what they're saying. They are still in existence, mixed blood descendants of. And then everybody else, right? So then, we dodged the hijack with their numbers. We know in this case a lot of people being reclassified, paper genocide, enslaved, all that. You just admitted it, talking about Negroes mixing. What you mean? If the original so-called Powhatan were also dark complexion, so what you talking about? Right? All right. So we continue now, guys. Hope you're enjoying the reading so far and learn about these tribes. All right. And we're going to go on to the Qs now, the letter Q. And we start with the Quapaw. The traditional home of this tribe was on Ohio River, above the mouth of the Wabash. But by 1673, when Marquette descended the Mississippi, they were already established near the junction of the Arkansas, with the great river, one town being just at the junction of the two. One considerably higher up on the west bank of the Mississippi, one on the east bank between them, and one on the Arkansas itself. They were probably distinct from the Pakaha made by De Soto, with whom they have sometimes been identified. Before 1700, the Tongigua or Jigua village of the east side of the Mississippi moved across and settled with the Toriman at the junction of the Arkansas. And meanwhile, the Quapaw town had moved lower down. Not many years later, all had removed to the Arkansas, and in 1805, Sibley found them in 3 villages on the south side of the Arkansas, about 12 miles above the Arkansas post. In 1821, they ceded this territory to the United States government and agreed to remove to the Caddo country on Red River. They were assigned a tract of land on Bayou Trichie on the south side of the Red, but it was frequently overflowed and their crops were destroyed and also much sickness resulted. In consequence, they returned to their old country, but the European settlers annoyed them so much that in 1833 the United States government ceded to them 150 sections of land in southeastern Kansas, and that the northern part of the Indian Territory to which they agreed to move. February 23rd, 1867, they ceded their lands in Kansas and the northern part of those in the territory. In 1877, the Ponca were brought to live with them for a time, and when those Indians passed to their own reservation farther west, most of the Quapaw also went. Still later, the Quapaw lands were allotted in severalty, and they are now citizens of Oklahoma. All right, the Quapaw. And I hear their numbers, right? Take a look at it if you like. Pause it. All right. So we go learn about another tribe now. This is the Quinipissa. Quinipissa. This tribe was found by LaSalle in 1682, a few miles above the present site of New Orleans, but on the opposite side of the river. The people received him with flights of arrows. They didn't want him there. And on his return, used peacemaking overtures as a mask for a treacherous but futile attack upon his force. 4 years later, Tonti made peace with the tribe. In 1699, Iberville hunted for them in vain, but later learned that they were identical with the Mugulasha, then living with the Bayogula, about 20 leagues above their former settlement. According to Savoy, or Savoy, however, the Quinipissa were not identical with the Mugulasha, but had united with them. In any case, there can be no doubt that the chief of the Quinipissa in 1682 and in 1686 was the same man as the chief of the Mugulasha in 1699. In May 1700, shortly after Iberville had visited them for the second time, the Mugulasha were attacked and almost completely destroyed by their fellow townsmen, the Bayogula. The destruction was not as complete probably as the French writers would have us believe. All right, they try to write them out of history. You see, the French, but we do not hear of either Mugulasha or Quinipissa afterward, and the remnant must have united with the Bayogula or Huma, the latter having been their allies. And here's the population again. So it's talking about over here. Gravier says that more than 200 were killed in the massacre the following year. Wow. So you see, the Quinipissa, always the rebel ones, the ones that didn't want to do treaties or help the Europeans in general, they're just like forgotten, gone, right? Or absorbed, murdered, enslaved, paper genocide, all that. All right, all that. All right. So that was the Q's, right? And we're going to go ahead and do the S's as well, the letter S, okay? You guys ready? This is the last letter we're going to do today, but I think there's a lot of them. So we're going to start off with Saluda, the Saluda. On the manuscript map of George Hunter, 1730, in connection with a place name, we read Salude town, where a nation settled 35 years ago, removed 18 years to Conestoga in Pennsylvania. Millen points out that this would indicate an occupancy from 1695 to 1712, inclusive evidently The above information also appears in the Jeffreys Atlas, and the site is indicated on several other maps of the early 18th century. Although Siouan tribes occupied the country east of this point, and Muskogeans that to the west, it is probable that the Saluda were a band of the Shawnee Indians on their way from the neighborhood of Augusta to Pennsylvania, whither so many of the Savannah River Shawnee are known to have gone. All right, the Saluda. And it says population, there is no clue. They like, nope, we don't know what happened to the Saluda, huh? You're still here. We continue with another tribe, right? We got the Santi, all right, the Santi. The earliest mention of this tribe appeared to be in the relation by the Spanish navigator Ecija of his second expedition dated 1609. They were then on the river which bears their name, where they were again found by the English at the time when they settled the province of South Carolina 61 years later. Wow, later. Here they were visited by Lawson in 1701. In 1716, becoming involved along with the Congaree in hostilities with the colonists. They were defeated by the latter, assisted by the Cusabo. So they got defeated by the colonists with the help of the Cusabo. And most of them were sent as slaves. Listen, and most of them, listen, come on, man, body bag for the illusion. Listen, why am I saying that? Because most of them, what they're saying here, were sent as slaves to the West Indies. Body bag for the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop. Yeah, real slave trade. This is what I'm trying to tell you. When you start getting specific and going deep down, you start seeing who's really getting enslaved and being sent to the West Indies to replace the so-called local Indians. You know, they were telling us all these years that it was so-called Africans they were bringing in. Remember, these same people that are being classified as free people of color, right? They're ending up in the West Indies. Now they're Negroes or Africans. Yeah. So most of them were sent, most of them, huh? Can you guys believe that? The Santi peoples sent to the West Indies. We might have to do a whole research on that to get all the specifics, and we'll probably do that one day, right? Add it to the real slave trade series and a lot of these tribes that we're learning about. Okay? It says that the few who escaped probably united with the Catawba. Probably. So are they Eastern Siouan? Santi. It says the Saponi. Here we go. I know a lot of you are probably Saponi. Again, that's a Tutulo word. Saponi. Sapone means Blackfoot. Literally, guys, it means Blackfoot. Saponi. This is evidently, again, this is an Eastern Siouan tribe. This is evidently a contraction of Monasuka Pano. All right, the name of the tribe located by John Smith in the Monacan country. That was their original mention. When the English got there, they called them the Monasuka Pano. Sukapano. The name of the tribe that was located in Monacan country. Monacans are also Eastern Siouans, guy. At a place identified by Bushnell as on the banks of the Rivanna, directly north of the site of the University of Virginia. Ha! And about 1/2 mile up the river from the bridge of the Southern Railway. Sometime afterward, probably due to the pressure of peoples toward the north, they left this place and settled on a creek usually identified with Otter River, a northern tributary of the Roanoke in the present Campbell County, Virginia. Here they were visited by John Lederer in 1670 and Thomas Batts in 1671. From this place they moved again to an island in the Roanoke River, just below the junction of the Staunton and Dan, and still later to Yadkin River, near the present Salisbury, North Carolina, where Lawson found them in 1701. They were accompanied during much of this time by the Tutulo, and before 1711 moved in toward the Virginia settlements, uniting on the way with the Occaneechi and crossing back over the Roanoke, all right? All Eastern Siouan people coming together here. Their new settlement called Sapona Town. was a short distance east of Roanoke River and 50 miles west of the present Windsor, Bertie County, North Carolina. In 1714, along with other allied tribes, they were placed by Governor Spotswood close to Fort Christiana, near the present Goldsonville, Virginia. In 1722, peace was made at Albany between the northern and southern Indians. In about 1740, part of the Saponi and Tutelo moved north, stopping for a time in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. In 1753, this tribe and the Tutelo were formally adopted by the Cayuga, and in 1765 they were living about Sadie, Pennsylvania, where part remained until 1778, though in 1771 the principal portion had their village in the Cayuga territory, about 2 miles west of the present Ithaca, New York. In 1789, a remnant of the tribe was still living with the Cayuga on Seneca River in Seneca County. They have presumably become incorporated with the Tutelo and are no longer distinguished as a separate tribe. All right, is that fully true? And they all get incorporated with the Tutelo. So one band of Saponi remain in the South, however, in Granville County, North Carolina, where they were reported in 1755 and are perhaps still represented by a body of Croatan Indians, in parentheses, right, in Person County, which was cut from Granville. All right, so Saponi, right? Yeah. So a lot of those Saponi or even Tutelo people, they went up. A lot of the Eastern Sioux people went up, as they were saying here, how these people were starting to go up. Some of them went up and mixed with Iroquois people, Iroquois tribes, and they became known as the Mingos, guys. All right, in case you wondering if you know if your people are part of the Mingos, that's a combination of these Eastern Sioux people who had gone back up. They were from the East Coast, right? They were from the Southeast. For a long time, they had been there, hundreds of years, thousands of years, But they had, again, a lot of these people gone up and mixed with some Iroquois people and becoming known as the Mingos. Not the other way around. They came from the South and mixed with the Iroquois people and became known as Mingos. Okay, just want you to know. All right, so here's their numbers. Oh, here they talk about the Huguenot Fontaine. Huguenot, huh? Huguenot. So we continue, and it says here, Saturiwa. All right, wow, Saturiwa. That's like that Indian, right? The so-called Moro with the emerald pearls, right? That's literally an Indian of the Timucua tribe. They say as a representation of Saturanio or Saturiwa. All right, so they're saying there's an actual people that took the name and became a tribe. So it says Saturiwa, a Timucua tribe located about the mouth of St. John's River in 1564 to 65, when the French Huguenot colony was established. French Huguenots, huh? Who's the Huguenots? Ex-Moors, ex-Sephardic Jews. That's who had established themselves in southern France and became known as the Huguenots. Huguenot. The dealings of the colonists with them were very intimate, and after the destruction of the colony, they assisted Dominique de Gourgues in his punitive expedition of 1567. All right, they assisted him in getting revenge on the Catholics, guys. Remember, we have a video on Dominique de Gourgues not too long ago. All right, check it out. So later they became warm friends of the Spaniards and were served by the missions of San Juan del Puerto at the mouth of the St. John's, Nombre de Dios, close to St. Augustine, and San Diego de Salamototo, near the site of Picolata. Subject to the mission of Nombre de Dios, in 1602 were the towns of Soloy, Capuaca, and Paliaca, and to San Juan del Puerto, Veracruz, Arratobo, Niollo, Potaya, San Mateo, San Pablo, Jicachirico, Chinisca, and Carabay. The mission of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, 3 leagues from St. Augustine, was also perhaps in their country. This appears only in the mission list of 1655, along with Nombre de Dios, San Juan del Puerto, and Salamototo. The last mentioned under the name San Diego de Laca, the chief of San Juan del Puerto, was among those concerned in the rising of 1656. The names of the three principal missions appear, however, in the report of Calderon and in the list of 1680, though at that later date Nombre de Dios seems to have changed the character of its population. They are afterwards lost in the rapid disintegration of all the Timucua peoples. They are lost, Disintegration, what does that mean? Enslavement, reclassification, paper genocide, murder? The chief who appeared so prominently in French and Spanish narratives is shown in Plate 42 from a drawing by Lemoyne, rediscovered and reproduced by Bushnell. All right, Saturagua, the Moor with the emerald pearls. I got a video on this, guys. Check it out. Okay, so you guys can see how they drew him. So we continue with another tribe. We got here the Pawokti. When we first hear of this tribe, it was located on Apalachicola River, 12 leagues, about 31 miles from San Luis Mission, modern Tallahassee. All right, so you guys can have a reference where they're talking about. Again, the Pawokti were there. It says a mission called Santa Cruz de Sabacola El Menor was established here and dedicated by Bishop Calderon, February 28, 1675, under the name La Encarnación a la Santa Cruz de Sabacola. The bishop was also claimed to have converted Sabacola el Grande, but no mission was begun there. Native tradition would place this tribe nearer the Gulf Coast at some period in their past history, and tradition seems to be supported by the Lamhati map, which appears to give their name to the Choctawhatchee River and place their town nearby. The journal of Captain Francisco Milan Tapia, who coasted the Gulf of St. Mark's to Pensacola in 1693, informs us that the eastern mouth of the Apalachicola River was called Sabacola. In Calderon's time, there seems to have been another branch of the tribe, living with the lower creeks below the falls of the Chattahoochee. And to this Fray Juan Ocon and two other missionaries were sent in 1679, but they were ordered away by the great chief of the Coweta. 2 years later, Fray Francisco Guiterres de Vera and another Franciscan were sent back with an escort of soldiers, and great expectations were entertained of the success of the mission. But within a few months, the Indians became hostile, and they were forced to withdraw. The Christianized Indians withdrew, with them apparently to the site of the lower mission at Santa Cruz. Possibly, all of the Pawokti may have moved north and returned, but our authorities do not make this point clear. In 1706 or 1707, the Pawokti were driven from this country, or rather it seems carried away, carried away by hostile Indians in alliance with the English, Indians helping Europeans enslave other Indians. As we hear of them next among the lower creeks only, where all appear to have gathered for a time. Part at least seemed to have settled upon Ocmulgee River, but after the Yamasee War in 1715, we find them all on or near the Chattahoochee, lower down than all other constituent bodies of the Confederation, except the lower Eufaula. Besides a big and little Pawokti, there were two branch towns here called Ocawaiji and Okiti Yakani. In 1832, another is recorded called Hachitkaba. There was yet another well up the Chattahoochee, sometimes placed between Casita and Coweta. Its name spelled Takawokli rather than Sawokli, and apparently called in one place New Tamatli. After removing to Oklahoma, the Pawokti settled near Okmulgee. They soon gave up their independent square ground and united in ceremonies with the Hichiti. There are indications of an offshoot of this tribe and a very unexpected place. A French map which has been conjecturally dated in 1697 enters a tribe called Sabougla on Josu River in the present state of Mississippi, and the name is still preserved in an affluent of the Yalubusha and a post office. This name is corrupted on Daniel Cox's map into Sambukia. So here's their population numbers according to them, right? You guys can pause it and take a look if you like. All right. All right, and now it's going to talk about the Seminole. All right, so-called Seminole. Remember, a lot of tribes going into these people. So, it says here, although now reckoned as one of the 5 civilized tribes, the name is applied to a body of Indians of very modern origin. All right, very modern origin. Pay attention, guys. Like the word Cherokee, very modern origin. The nucleus consisted of the Oconee Indians. That is the nucleus of them, though. Really, the Oconee Indians, whose home about 1695, 1715 was on Oconee River, Georgia, but who moved to the Lower Creek country about 1715 and 30 or 40 years later entered Florida and established themselves on the Appalachia Prairie. They belonged to a non-Muskogee group of Indians, of which the best-known representatives were the Hichiti, and except for a band of Ufogoula, the first tribes to join them were of this same connection, including some Sawokli, Tamatli, Apalachicola, Hichiti, and Chiaja. All right? Listen to this breakdown, guys. A part of whom soon came to be known as Mikasuki. All right? Mikasuki. Sounds almost Japanese, right? Though under what circumstances is unknown. According to Romans, the Ufogoula settlement was made in 1767 and was on a hammock north of Tampa Bay, to which it gave its own name, Tecati, or Red House. In 1778, a second Muskogee immigration took place, contributed by part of the people of Colomi, Uzhachi, and Kantati. Like, listen to all these different groups coming together, forming the Seminoles, guys. Listen. Immediately after the Creek War of 1813 to 1814, their numbers were tripled by refugee Indians, mainly from Upper Creek towns, and particularly from those speaking Muskogee, so that the linguistic complexion of the entire body was changed, listen, and the language usually called Seminole is Creek. The non-Muskogees, however, still included a powerful element and supplied the head chiefs. In 1817 and 1818, Andrew Jackson invaded Florida with a force in excess of 3,000 men and burned a large Seminole town on the Suwannee. In 1832, a treaty promising that the Florida Indians would remove west of the Mississippi was negotiated at Payne's Landing, but it was repudiated by the great majority of the Seminole. And in 1835, the Second and Great Seminole War broke out, which was not terminated until August 1842 and cost the lives of nearly 1,500 American soldiers, besides numerous civilians, and 20 million in money, right? Wow, that's in 1840s. Miconopi was the titular head chief of the Seminole as chief of the Oconee element, all right? But Osceola and Jumper, who came from the Upper Creek towns, furnished the brains of native resistance. The capture and imprisonment of the former by Treasury constitutes a black passage in our military annals, and particularly on the record of the perpetrator, General Thomas S. Jessup. Though the hysterical demand for quick results on the part of the European population behind him deserves equal condemnation, the greater part of the Seminole were removed to Oklahoma, where they were given a separate strip of territory and separate government just west of the creeks in what is now Seminole County. Those who remained behind consist of two main bands of one Muskogee, Cow Creek Indians, and the other Miccosukee, Big Cypress Indians. There were some smaller elements, but they have now lost their identity in the general body. And all the other ones, well, they're not even worth mentioning, he says. Wow. The Seminole and Oklahoma speak Creek for the most part, but a very few also understand the Hichiti tongue, more ancient. Miconopi, chief of the Seminole during the first part of the Seminole War, is shown in Plate 43, Figure 1 from McKinney and Hall. 3 different paintings of Osceola are reproduced in Plates 43, Figures 2, 44, and 45, Figure 1 from Catlin, and so on, right? So I got some videos, right, on Osceola. Right, go ahead and check it out. And they go here with their population numbers. I'm going to go ahead and pause it if you like and read it. All right, we does the hijack. So again, you guys, I hope you understand what they were doing, to create, what the Indians did themselves and create these confederacies, right? Different Indians, right, coming together, known as the Seminoles now. So we continue, and we have here the Siwi. The first appearance of this tribe is possibly under the name Chochi, right? Chochi, given as one of the provinces on or near the coast of what is now South Carolina by Francisco of Chicora, who was taken from this region in 1521. It is certainly mentioned by the Spanish captain Ecija, in the narratives of his voyage along the South Atlantic coast in 1609. So when it comes to the Chicora Indians that they say Francisco was from, this is the Chicori. The Chicori people are Eastern Siouan. Chicora is the same people that De Soto was talking about when he called them Chicora. So they took a lot of his people, enslaved them, and then they returned them, right? Alion's expedition, guys. They had brought them as slaves, right, back to the West Indies. And then they got in trouble for it. They had to return them. But one of them went to Europe. And then he came back. So this is when he came back. They're saying he called them the Chochi. It is certainly mentioned by the Spanish captain. Okay, we got that. It says in 1670, the colonists, who were shortly to establish themselves in Charlestown, met a band of Indians on Bull's Island, who were probably Siwi, since the tribe is known to have occupied Bull's Bay, also called Siwi Bay, and the lower part of Santee River, and inland toward the west to the vicinity of the present Moncks Corner, Berkeley County, along with the Cusabo. They helped the South Carolina colonists repel Spanish invaders and supplied them with corn. All right. Lawson, who visited them in 1701, found that they had been much reduced by smallpox and the use of alcoholic liquors. That fire water messed them up. And that was strategic, giving them liquor, right? And in particular, the loss of a fleet of canoes, which had attempted to sail directly to England for purposes of trade. Some of the survivors accompanied Barnwell in his expedition against the Tuscarora Indians. In 1715, they were reduced to one village, and the Yamasee War probably put an end to their separate existence. It is supposed that the remnant was finally incorporated with the Catawba. All right, with the Catawba. So yeah, they are Eastern Siouan most likely, right? Though they may first have united with the Santee or Chera. Again, all those are Eastern Siouan too. So yeah, these are Eastern Siouan people. Because you didn't know, guys. Go to another tribe here, another Eastern Siouan tribe. This is the Chakori, right? Shakur, huh? Chakori, Cherokee. Where'd they get this word Cherokee from, huh? Chakori, huh? The earliest home of this tribe, of which we have a hint, was apparently in South Carolina. It attained early fame out of all proportion to its importance owing to the fact that an Indian brought home by the Allion expedition, right, In 1521, that was Francisco Chicora, right? And known as Francisco of Chicora was probably from this tribe, right? He was the Chicora with the Chacori, right? Eastern Sioux people, they sold on these people. Alion ran into, right? The expedition of Alion. We got a whole video on that. And that video is so deep. The Alion expedition, go ahead and check it out, guys, because it debunks that whole 1619 first African slaves, false narrative. So go ahead and take a look at it. And these are all black folks. Most of these are, when we talk about Alion and all these people, right? So they got famous because they had brought one of them back to Europe, and then they brought him back. Sometime during the next 130 years, very likely in consequence of Juan Pardo's expedition, Juan Pardo, here we go again, 1566 to 67, the Chacori moved toward the north. And are next heard of in the report of Blondie and his companions of the expedition into North Carolina in 1650. During their return journey, these gentlemen speak of the Nottoway and Shakori's old fields between Meherin and Nottoway rivers. 4 years later, Governor Yarley was told by a Tuscarora Indian that this tribe, which he calls Shakoris, consisted of men of dwarfish stature but exceedingly brave, whom the Tuscarora had never been able to conquer. Why are you trying to conquer them, Tuscarora? The dwarfish race, They were short, the Shakori, but these are Eastern Sioux people. They were reported to be near neighbors of the Eno. And in 1672, Lederer found the villages of the two about 14 miles apart, that of the Shakori being farthest west. In 1701, Lawson found Eno and Shakori living in one village called Achushit. Again, Eastern Sioux, that's why they're living together. On Eno River, about 14 miles east of the Occaneechi village, because those are Eastern Sioux as well, which would perhaps be a short distance northeast of the present Durham, North Carolina. Barnwell identified them with the Sisipaha, but this must mean that the two were branches of one people, all right, Eastern Sioux. From then on, their history is identical with that of the Eno, both finally uniting with the Catawba. Catawba is all Eastern Sioux people. That's why they unite. And some Chacori blood may have found its way into the Croatan. And a lot of the supposed Croatan Indians are actually Eastern Sioux people, guys. Mixed with you already know, the people who landed on Roanoke and Jamestown. A lot of those were black Europeans. So it says Chacori population. And they try to have, it says, we have no figures regarding this tribe independently. You see, we don't know what happened to the Chacori. What happened to them? All right. So now we continue to the Shawnee. All right, the Shawnee. The Shawnee Indians were divided into the following bands: Chillicothe, Hatawikila, Kispogogi, Mequachaki, and Piqua. Piqua. Almost sounds like Pequot, right? Piqua. But the constitution and history of these is not well understood, though there are several towns usually bear the names of the bands. In particular, there were a number of towns in Ohio known as Chillicothe, and a number of others called Piqua. The most prominent band in the history of the Gulf tribes is the Hatawikela. Our earliest information regarding the Shawnee indicates that in very early historic times, they were on the Ohio River, which they had evidently reached from some point farther north, but before the end of the 17th century, they were settled on the Cumberland. They must have attracted to this spot in part by the Spanish post at St. Augustine, Florida, which they visited in order to trade. In 1674, at the Westow town near the present Augusta, Georgia, Henry Woodward met two Shawnee who had recently been at St. Augustine, and it was probably owing to the representations of these men that a considerable body of Shawnee moved over to the Savannah River and established themselves near the Westow. They drove these last from the region in 1681, much to the relief of the newly established colony of South Carolina. The Shawnee remained in this place long enough to give their name to Savannah River, but as early as 1707, some of them went to Pennsylvania and about 40 settled about 40 miles from Patapsco River in Maryland. In 1711, another band deserted South Carolina, and it is thought they may have been Indians known as Saluda. These seem to have been joined from time to time by other bands, some of whom stopped for a time on the Potomac before reaching the Quaker colony. A band numbering 30 was still on the Savannah in 1725, but may have been the Onatheaqua, who were reported in Pennsylvania in 1731. In 1715, however, as a result of the Yamasee War, a band of these Savannah Indians had moved to the Chattahoochee and settled near the site of Fort Gaines. Later, they passed over to Tallapoosa River, where they formed a town not far above its junction with the Coosa, which they occupied until the beginning of the 19th century. It is presumed that they reunited with their kinsmen in the north at that time, but I do not find a record of that time or the circumstances. A second body of Shawnee lived for a time among the Abika Indians. This band originally at least seems to have belonged to the Pequot division. It moved into Pennsylvania in 1692, along with a Frenchman named Martin Chartier, who died there in 1718. Peter Chabonne, or Pierre Chartier, his son, by a Shawnee woman, also married a Shawnee and settled among Indians of his own tribe at Allegheny sometime after 1732, where Chartier's town stood on the right bank of the Allegheny River, below the mouth of the Quispiminetas or Conemaugh. In April 1745, in consequence of a reprimand given by the Governor Gordon of Pennsylvania, he instigated 400 Shawnee to leave the government of Pennsylvania. A French document represents them as having come down from Sandusky, moved to a spot high up the Wabash, and then descended to the junction of the Wabash and Ohio, where they lived 2 years and then passed to the Abika country. But this statement in a letter written by Governor Vaudreuil of Louisiana, June 24, 1750, seems to be based on misinformation, since actually Chartier appears to have descended the Ohio, capturing some English traders on the way, and to have penetrated Kentucky to a site in the present Clark County on Lulbegrud Creek, where the Shawnee formed a town, which came to be known as Esquipatitiki. There they stayed until 1747, when they went down to the Tennessee in canoes and up the latter to Bear Creek. Ascending the stream for 30 miles and leaving their canoes there, they made an attack upon the Chickasaw, who vigorously repulsed them, and they settled in the Talladega country. In 1748, another letter by Governor Vaudreuil states that some English traders among the Creeks had endeavored to induce these Shawnee to assist in an attack upon Fort Toulouse, but they refused and wished to join the Shawnee on Tallapoosa River. It seems, however, that this intention was not carried out, for they were still in the Talladega country in 1758, their settlement being at Chittagong, which we know as Silacauga or Buzzard's Roost. A French enumeration made in 1750 also mentions them, and some maps give the name of a second Shawnee town as Ocmulgee, signifying in the Creek language Mulberry Place. Although, as stated, this band seems originally to have been Pequot, it is possible that it may have been the one later called Quispocota. It may have derived its name from the town of Esquipatitiki. At any rate, there is evidence of a former close association between the Quispocota and the Tucabachi Creeks. The Busk or ceremonial name of Tucabachi was Ispokogi or Spokogi, derived traditionally from certain supernatural beings who had descended from the heavens bearing the famous Tucabachi plates. Right, you guys hear that? Oh, we got to get into that. And according to one version, these were entrusted first to the Shawnees. It is also some significance that Tecumseh belonged to the Quispocota Kota, but rather remarkable that the Tukabachi were one of the towns which refused to ally themselves with him, retiring to the lower creeks to live with their friends, the Coweta. I do not find any reference to the time when the Talladega Shawnee left the Creek Nation. It may have been after the Treaty of 1763. All right. But that was, oh, we're still going. It says plate 47. Okay, so we're done. But here's the numbers. Again, if you want to pause and take a look. And we continue with another tribe here. It says here the Sisi Paha. Sisi Paha. You ever heard of them, guys? The Sisi Paha. The first mention of this tribe is probably by Bandera and recounting Juan Pardo's expedition, again, Juan Pardo all over the place, of the year 1567, where it appears under the form Soxpa or Sawapa. He seems to locate it near the Santi. In 1701, Lawson heard of them, but did not pay them a visit. Their principal settlement was evidently near Sachapaha on Ha River, North Carolina. Barnwell identifies them with the Shakori. All right, so Eastern Sioux people, right? They're right, to whom they were no doubt closely related. So they are Eastern Sioux, another Eastern Sioux tribe, guys. The Sisi Paha. You never heard of any of these people, right? They are mentioned as one of those tribes which joined the Confederation against the English in 1715. Afterward, they probably united with the Kayawi, Chakori, Eno, and Chera. All right, again, all Eastern Sioux, in part in part finally fused with the Catawba, right? The Catawba Indians. So a lot of Catawba are actually coming independently from other Eastern Sioux tribes that eventually were absorbed into the Catawba, who were also Eastern Sioux, right? While others are no doubt represented among the Indians of Lumber River or the Lumbee. A lot of Lumbee, again, mixed tribes. Sisipaha population, all right, they got no figures. They got no numbers. Yeah, murder, reclassified, enslavement, paper genocide. Yeah, we know. Relocated. So we continue here with the Soacatino or Shakatin. The Soacatino or Shakatin. You guys ever heard of these people? I never did. It says that this is a Caddo tribe visited by Spaniards under Moscoso in 1542, but mentioned uncertainly, if at all, by later writers. All right, what happened to these people, the Chacatin or Swacatino? What happened to these people, guys? You see? What happened? They got no more info on them. We continue, it says here, the Sugary. All right, the Sugary tribe. A small tribe on Sugar Creek in the present Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, and York County, South Carolina. According to Lawson, 1701, they occupied many settlements, but were probably closely related to the Catawba. All right, again, another Eastern Sioux tribe, guys, the Sugary. Eastern Siouxans all over the Southeast. And a lot of you descend from these people of the Eastern Sioux tribes and don't even know it. So they're closely related to the Catawba, again, Eastern Sioux people too, with whom they ultimately united. In 1754, Sugartown appears as the name of a Catawba settlement. It is not improbable that they were a branch of the Shakori. Shakori sounds very similar. Yes, Shakori. And then it says Sugary population unknown. All right. They don't want you to know. Don't worry about it. Unknown. We don't know what happened to the Sugary. Again, I may be able to hint at enslavement, murder, reclassification, paper genocide, relocation, all of the above. All right. We continue with the Suruke or Joruke or Sureche. Sureche. A small tribe about Cape Canaveral on the east coast of Florida. This is evidently the Seropi mentioned by Laudonniere, the Huguenot, and Lemoyne, who placed it on an island in a large inland lake. but the island was probably one of those in the coastal lagoons, not in a lake, Okeechobee, as has sometimes been assumed. In 1597, there was a short war between these people and the Spaniards, which consisted mainly in a surprise attack upon one of the Suruque towns, in which 60 persons were killed and 54 captured. Nothing further is heard regarding them, and they probably partook of the fortunes of other Timucua towns and tribes. So what did other Timucua towns and tribes happen? They got enslaved. So that's what you're talking about? Enslaved, reclassified, paper genocide, relocated. Yeah, we know. Yeah, that's what happened to the Soruque, right? That's what they did. Yeah, 187. That's the page we're on right now. We're going to end it right here. All right. We're going to end it again so we don't make the videos too long. All right. The next tribe starts with T, and we're going to continue that on the next part. And we're going to finish up, these tribes and that we've been doing in alphabetical order. I hope that reading this information has helped a lot of you, especially when it comes to genealogy. This is very important to me. This is very connected to genealogy, guys, if you're into that. So I hope you enjoy the readings. You get more clear details of certain people that you never heard of or that you already knew, but now you get additional details of who might they be related to, where they were located, what kind of happened to them maybe, you know. But yeah, again, this was the book, The Indians of the Southeastern United States by John R. Swanton. Classics of Smithsonian Anthropology, says down here. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed today's reading, today's part. All right. One more part to go. And then we start breaking down other books that gets very detailed like this one with specific tribes as well. We're going to continue learning about specific tribes, their information that a lot of the time gets ignored, neglected, played down, like it doesn't get no attention, and now these tribes, these people are forgotten. So, I like to read this along with you. I'm learning a lot too and connecting a lot of dots. All right. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end today of this reading. I appreciate you guys making the time for that. Shout out to all my moderators. Shout out to everybody that came through today to listen to me. I appreciate you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.